When it comes to sports performance analysis, there are very few people that have as much experience over a vast array of sports as today's guest. Julia Wells is the current head of performance analysis at the English Institute of Sport, and so far her career has spanned over 20 years. That career has been dedicated to coaching, analysing and improving the standard of many different teams and athletes that she has worked with over the years across both team and individual sports. I'm really grateful for Julia agreeing to speak with me, as I think there's so much to learn from somebody with such a vast knowledge and experience. I want to learn about the analysis of other lesser known sports, and I also want to get up to speed on exactly what the EIS is and what it does and how that fits into the landscape of sport within England, plus the Olympics and much more. Her role has obviously evolved in the time that she's been with the EIS, and so I'm curious to learn about that. So without further ado, let's get into the chat with Julia. Julia, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Very well, thanks, Chris. Thanks for inviting me on.
No, I'm really happy to have you on. I mean, again, don't take this the wrong way, but there's not many people as probably experienced as you in the game, I would say, in terms of analysis. So, I was just before you kind of jumped on, I was on your LinkedIn profile looking at the previous roles and some of the, the date of the first role, and that's a lot, a long time ago. So the different sports you've worked in over the years is amazing to see, and it's something that I want to learn more about, really. So yeah, I mean, what I've done, Julia, I've done a little quick intro before this kind of came on, but I'd obviously pass it on to you to kind of probably do a better job than me. So just for those who don't know who you are, give a quick intro on who you are, what you're currently doing, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into your job roles and things like that.
Yeah, cheers, Chris, and thanks for making me feel really old. Been around the block, but no. So I'm Julia Wells, and I head up the performance analysis team within the English Institute of Sport. We've basically got around 25 analysts, 22 embedded in sports currently, and we've also the other 3 or 4 that are wrapped around that are the technical leads that support the practitioners on the ground. So essentially working across around 20 Olympic and Paralympic sports, and it has varied, across the cycle. But I think when the EIS was first formed, there was just a handful of us. I think I was around the third or fourth in, I think, behind obviously Stafford Murray heading up then, key name in performance analysis. Mike Hughes Jr., obviously still out there doing his thing, and Steve Evans, that I'd worked with in Cardiff as well with Stafford prior to starting the EIS, working through a handful of sports, and then gradually through the kind of, I guess, back end of Athens and into the Beijing cycle, the team started to evolve and grow to around that 20-25 analysts across the system, and then it fluctuates depending on what's going on and where things are with sports and funding and their staffing structures and so on. But it's kind of been a fairly steady team, and something maybe we'll touch on later. We've got our own sort of performance data strategy now as well, so we're starting to see embedded roles in sports as a performance data lead. So lots of crossover with the analysis and performance analysis as an area. So great to see quite a wide sort of career path now developing across the analysis spectrum.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, obviously we'll touch on this later, but like the Olympic cycles and things like that, because then obviously that plays a big part. Just in terms of just sort of a background on the EIS itself, so am I right in saying it's sort of the 20-year anniversary or pretty much just gone, or is it about 20 years old in terms of what it is? So is that different sites across the UK, and kind of, what's the purpose of the EIS for those that don't know, really?
Yeah, so we are celebrating our 20 years. So really excited that we're out of the back end of the pandemic, and we're hoping to get together this year and celebrate that and look back at all the successes and learnings over the years. So EIS is funded through UK Sport, which is funded through Department of Digital, Culture and Media and Sport, government. So we get a grant that covers us through the Olympic cycle and Paralympic cycles as a priority. But like I say, we do work with Commonwealth Games as well. And essentially we're like a service provider then to those sports to help support them with their sports science and medicine provision. And then we've got a number of central services as well. So like athlete health, performance data, performance innovation, sort of integral roles that integrate into the sports plans. So things that, sports can't, do alone really. Those areas can really help empower and enable sports to move forward on various aspects of their plan. I guess for me, I work within the sort of the human performance strategy predominantly, and now, as I mentioned, linking in with the performance data. And we've got a number of heads of across the sports science medicine areas that will have practitioners. So basically, sports will employ practitioners through the IS to embed into their performance support team. So essentially, that's basically the model that we work with.
Yeah. So where are you based then, Julia? What site are you kind of at the moment?
So I'm tagged into Bath, but I live in South Wales. So we've got a number of sites around England. So typically, as a sort of head of service, we would travel quite a lot. Things obviously changed quite a bit with COVID, so it's definitely less traveling, but able to connect and work across the different sites remotely as well. So that's been a massive, I guess, change in the ways of working with off the back of COVID as well, to be more effective and cost effective as well, but still impactful. But like I say, a majority of our practitioners are connected to an EIS site and a sports site. So whether that's the same thing or maybe slightly different. So obviously we've got, like, for example, British Cycling in Manchester within the velodrome. So all our performance support team would be well embedded in those sports there. But they have access to other areas within the Manchester EIS site there. Similar sort of thing with Sheffield. We've got the EIS Sheffield up there, and boxing and a number of other sports that tap into that centre as well.
Yeah, the Sheffield one is the only one I've ever actually been to, I think. So been a few times, and obviously very impressive, all the facilities that are there. It's fantastic. So just kind of touching on, you mentioned the funding actually from UK Sport, Julia. So just on your website, just kind of looking and going back to the Olympic cycles and things like that, it says here, so for the Tokyo cycle, what we got here, so there was around sort of £67 million or whatever given to you guys. So is that then a case of you can, obviously not you personally, but you can do what you want with that money to bet, or is there certain pots that need to be spent on analysis or certain pots on nutrition and stuff like that? How does that kind of work, if you're privy to that?
Yeah, so basically sports will get their funding allocation through the UK Sport, and then obviously they can go, they would have everyone would have put in a strategy plan that would get approved and supported by UK Sport to then allow that funding to be released. And so similar for us as EIS. So essentially, we put in a strategy. We work quite intensively through pre-Tokyo. Kind of, we're probably coming up to it now, where we'll as in my role, we'll start supporting the directors in the next submission. So essentially, that all needs to get approved so that we know what money is going into human performance to support the technical leads, the heads of service side of it that would be core funded, and then the same for like innovation, athlete health, and performance data, and then operationally as well, and facilities and so on. So it's a really impressive funding support from UK Sport. They've obviously continued to fund us since coming up to our 20 years. So which is great, and is an integral part of then supporting the sports on the grounds.
Yeah, and then in terms of that then, Julia, so does each different sport then get a different amount of money, or is that from a separate pot, or is that from that main pot?
Yeah, separate.
That's separate. Okay. And does that determine by how well they do and how they forecast the next years or whatever? How does that kind of work?
Yeah, so UK Sport, again, if it's all pretty open information that gets published around sports get funded as well. So similar to what you've just found on the IS website, that's all declared on UK Sport, and there's normally different announcements. There's been a recent one with the Winter Olympics on a slightly different timescale to us, and obviously the back end of last year with the extra year of Tokyo as well. So essentially we'll be looking at building that submission up pre-Olympic, and then I guess the method of way UK Sport would assess that would be launched as well with the various different sports and their CEOs and performance directors. So yeah, they would put in for their Olympic or Paralympic or both, or Commonwealth Games campaigns, you know.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm just curious to know how, because I think let's just go back to your LinkedIn profile, Julia. So the first kind of position at the EIS you have was sort of 2004 to 2006 as a performance analyst. So, you know, how was the landscape of analysis then? And when you first got into it, because I'm pretty sure that obviously a lot of software that is around now didn't even exist back then. So kind of what got you into analysis? How did you kind of stumble into it, and why really? And what was your main sport, Julie? Do you have a preferred sport that you were back at the time that's kind of where you were going towards?
Yeah. So, okay. So like, how far back do you want to go? So I guess my sport was squash.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, a lot of analysis came through squash. If you think about Mike Hughes, senior, junior, Stafford Murray, Nick James as well from a research point of view. You know, Steve Evans, we're all squash players, and ironically, you know, Mike Hughes, senior, moved to my area and joined Cardiff, or what is now Cardiff Met, and joined my squash club. But as you know, aside to that, I just loved that the analysis aspect of squash. You know, it's heavily tactically, psychologically, like, you know, physically, the whole shebang really. And so yeah, you're right. Computers were probably I mean, I've just tried flashbacks to when I was doing my degree, and I think I was on a word processor. So yeah, a very, very different landscape. So a lot of, you know, hand notation basically, you know, where it all stemmed from. So we would do a lot of tactical profiling. I got into coaching as well as a teenager, so quite young, supporting a club and my own playing, and then started working with Squash Wales at the time, within as a coach, and integrating, you know, analysis into my kind of coaching profile. And then, like I say, my Q senior moved to my town, and then I looked to go to Cardiff, so I studied at Cardiff, and then it kind of, I guess, the love for analysis just continued to grow and develop as it became a thing, you know, on its own. So within my degree, there was no performance analysis options. The word performance analysis didn't even exist. So you know, it was very much notation analysis, so very much more, you know, picking out sort of event tactical information, and obviously that's, you know, evolved massively since then. So through my degree, continued to move in that space, and then it was probably around my third year, so you're talking like 1998, where analysis, you know, and provision and consultancy started to develop within the university as well, linking it with, like, you know, the likes of England squash, England badminton, you know, again, Mike Hughes and you know, the late Keith Lyons as well. You know, you had the Centre for Performance Analysis that was based there, so there was elements of, like, not only just using it with my coaching, I was able to do some consultancy and sort of hook in on that, and then start doing my postgrad. I did an MPhil, research based, because, you know, again, masters in performance analysis didn't exist, and that allowed me to continue my research, combine it with some consultancy, and work across numerous sports, get out of my comfort zone with squash. Started assisting with Stafford and Steve around different projects, and then taking on some of my own projects. I remember doing an ice hockey project that was pretty scary, but what a great experience. And then doing some stuff for media as well around football, the penalty analysis. I think it's probably the one paper that's had the most hits, even though it was like donkeys years ago, but obviously big sport, and a hot topic at the time, and still continues to be. But yeah, essentially built up then, and obviously the Stafford went on to then head up the performance analysis in the English Institute of Sport when that was born in 2002. And I was kind of coming off the back of my postgrad, thinking about doing a PhD, and I'd been accepted like at Swansea to go and join Nick, or do a stay at Cardiff, and then these jobs started coming out, and I started to do my PhD at Cardiff, but then was looking for, you know, my career path really, and you know, like I say, I knocked on that door a few times and got in 2004, started in like April 2004 with EIS up in Loughborough. And the model we had back then was very much EIS were given the funds, and sports would come to us and asking for certain services. Yeah. So the reason for that recruitment in Loughborough was canoe slalom. Up in Nottingham were asking for support, and there was a few other sports like a bit of netball. There was athletics, taekwondo, and a few other sports, or supporting the performance support team with some of their video provision as well, and technical analysis. And then it kind of grew from there, really. Canoe slalom wanted more and more, and I started to work more with them, and eventually was pretty much full-time with them in the lead up to Beijing. So that was kind of my practitioner journey, as such, as you spotted on LinkedIn, where it was very much a multi-sport, but again, predominantly focused then around canoe slalom in the lead up to Beijing, which was amazing. Again, a sport I knew nothing about, really. So again, quite scary, but some really good people around me to support and make sure we could build on their kind of performance analysis provision year on years. And that's when I moved into a senior role then, post, I guess, the back end of Beijing cycle, and then relocated with them down to London in prep for London then. So yeah, quite a journey with EIS, and I was able to continue working with them through to London, and then it was through the Rio cycle that I started stepping away from frontline and just going into what we've got now is the technical leadership model of support. So again, Stafford Murray was head of, then Chris White. So working closely with Chris White, who's now with LTA, and stepping away from frontline, bringing on the next, succession planning, working closely with canoeing on that, and then it was sort of pre-Rio that I was able to go full-time technical lead, and then Chris left, and I was successful to get the head of role in 2018. Yeah. So 18 years of one employer.
Nice.
I have tried to leave, but and a few times. But I'm so glad I haven't.
That's very, because I mean, a lot of the people that watch these kind of videos that pop out are sort of students at uni, and they, they're probably like 18 years old. So and just kind of, and I don't want to make you feel old again, Julia, but when you said 1998, I was only 7 then, so I didn't have a clue what analysis was or what even, so. But there's a few things from what you said there. So you mentioned obviously your coaching from the start. Initially, you like squash coach, and that seems to be a kind of a debate at the moment in terms of should analysts be coaches as well? Should they be qualified as coaches? So what's your thoughts on that, Julie? Obviously, I'm sure that kind of helped you out early on. So I presume you played and coached squash, and then it led to the analysis because of the interest. So because just flicking it back to my main sport in football is, some of the top analysts now are obviously required to have their coaching badges, whether it be, just a level 2 or UEFA B, etc. So personally, I think it's, useful. I think the analyst is part of the coaching staff, so they should be kind of on that wavelength, but obviously there's pros and cons either way. So what's your thoughts on that, Julia?
Yeah, I think we have this conversation quite a lot as well internally. If I think about the way Stafford sort of led the analysis team back from its infancy, it was very much about transferable skills to sports that, essentially you just don't have that number of analysts out there that always have the sporting background. And I'd probably say that landscape has changed and evolved as we've consistently put out more roles in these areas across a spectrum of Olympic and Paralympic sports. And we've predominantly recruited, and predecessors recruited more on the technical and the person that fit for the sport, and then accelerate that sporting knowledge through experience and exposure within the delivery. And obviously I went through that absolutely definitely with canoe slalom. I'd watched Paddlers Up when I was a kid, which you probably haven't heard of, and that was about it. So we still have elements of recruiting in that way, and it is very much a desirable if you have a knowledge in, you see our JDs, they tend to be, some sports maybe would want it to be essential. So we did have one exception within judo. If you think about judo as a sport and the language of the sport and the technical component of it is really hard. I mean, to try to determine what they're doing technically without the knowledge of sports would have been tough. So Chris Barry, who's works across British Judo and EIS, he has gone down that coach analyst route. So that's worked really well. So again, it's really trying to fit in with what the sports needs are. I was definitely more in that coaching space and linking in with the coaching, application of the information that's coming in and that kind of thing, and trying to, I guess, allow the coaches to do their job in how that then links into coaching. So it's helpful for sure, but do you have to be a qualified coach? I'm not too sure. I think it's more about your understanding of what your role is and then your application of that. And if it means doing a coaching course is going to help with that, then great. We've also had analysts that have gone from one sport to another and transfer across, because whether that's because of a funding change or just a progression opportunity that doesn't always come up in sports that don't have that allow that kind of funding or that or need that level of practitioner. So probably I would say do what's right for the sport. We've had similar one where some coaches are wanting to go into that analysis route. So we would 100% encourage that if it's right for the sport. And then obviously with the whole kind of data landscape coming into the role and increasing the data science skills and some people moving into pure sort of data, performance data analyst role. So again, they might steer away from the coaching side. So again, very role specific and sports led, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think I do kind of, because I've on this obviously channel I've spoke to different analysts, like cricket analysts, rugby analysts and stuff like that. And I think it is important to just be aware of what's going, because you can learn things from other sports as well. How they do things can, you could definitely take something from one sport and kind of put it into your workflows, and it'll improve the way you do things. But no, I agree with that, Julia. I think in terms of so obviously you're head of performance analysis, you've got all the analysts. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but in terms of what else EIS has, so I'm presuming there's an equivalent of you maybe in nutrition and sports science and stuff, and then it's kind of branches down. So you've got all of these different disciplines under the EIS. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So heads of across all the different sports science disciplines. We've got physiotherapy that sits in within our athlete health strategy, but really aligned and integrated into our human performance strategy. And obviously you've got your medical provision as well, and doctors that are at the EIS, and then so you've got all those heads of, and then wrapped around the heads of have got technical leadership. So essentially it's about I guess developing the practitioners and the people on the ground, governance around the discipline, and supporting the progression of the discipline in line with the right governance and standards. You've got connecting them to the network. I think that's one of our biggest strengths. So the fact that we've got embedded practitioners in sports and then in different sports, and then it's like connecting and trying to, I guess, learn fast, answer questions, share, engage, so we're not, you're not having to have performance analysts that are just solo in their sport, which tends to happen, and they're sort of like, lost to themselves or trying to fight and connect with a network. So we can do that really easily, and then obviously we can do that really well interdisciplinary as well, which works really well for the performance support teams within the sports. And then we've got our central services. So I mentioned the athlete health that has the physiotherapy provision in there, but there's a lot of I guess systems and support that is needed to monitor athlete health, injury, illness, and so on. So again, that's done at the right level, and we've got a performance innovation then that work with sports on their innovation projects, which can be quite long term, real kind of moonshot kind of projects, and high risk versus sprint projects that can be done and impacting year in, year out really. And then our new strategy that's been integrated into Paris is the performance data. So some people might have seen or you heard the term sport intelligence team before. So that still exists within UK Sport in their performance insight team. And EIS has taken on performance data. So again, we've got head of, which is David Gallimore there. And then I've sit within that performance data leadership team within the learning and community strand. So obviously, a lot of the learning community around data, the whole life cycle really of data from, capture, prep and analysis and visualization, is integral core areas for performance analysis delivery. So we work really closely on that side of things. And then obviously all the operational facilities and all the support staff and the administration that's there to help all the different sites and the delivery that goes on. Yeah.
So just going back to what I've seen on the website, Julie, it says on there sort of the EIS covers up to around about 40 sports. So just quite a lot of different things. I wouldn't have a clue of naming them all, but just to kind of give people an idea of some of them, we've got I wrote down something like canoe, slalom, gymnastics, taekwondo, squash, judo, and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of them are seen as probably the more obscure sports, in terms of people's knowledge and how popular they are. So just kind of if someone was wanting to be an analyst for, say, canoe, slalom, would they be employed by the EIS, and then the canoe team would then utilize the resource of the EIS, or would they be employed by the canoe team?
So if a sport can choose to invest in EIS practitioners, they would choose that, and they would work in partnership with us to recruit, induct, and support that practitioner. So it's definitely a sport choice. Obviously, canoe slalom started that campaign back in 2004 when I started, and has continued to do that. So we've had a number of analysts, move through the canoe slalom delivery, and we've got, currently at the moment, Kristen in there leading the way, and we've taken on an internship to sport. So again, thinking of that succession planning really, and making sure the sport have got the appropriate support on the ground. So it's very much a sports choice, preferred supplier, I guess you could term us, and then we will work with them to support that whole recruitment really. And then just sticking to the canoe slalom, because again, it's something that I know nothing about really. So what would an analyst actually be doing, focusing, looking at with the canoe slalom team? Like what kind of things is there to be analysed? So it's a very technical sport, with a number of tactical components to it as well. Obviously, pretty high on psychological as well, with some of the white water that they're facing, the challenges they've got to do when you get to know the sport. And predominantly when I started, like, video was an integral part of the coaches' process. They were all on the riverbank filming their athletes and their opposition, and reviewing live, where they're just simply playing back, the footage there and then. On the good old camcorders we had back in the day with tapes. I won't even go there. Were they black and white, Julia? Really, sometimes. Didn't plug the connector in properly. No, so video was an integral part, which was a fantastic hook to get into with that sport, and it still is today. So it's evolved with everything. So it's very much, the goal was to maintain that kind of level of video provision, but also evolve it. And then what we noticed really as we went through kind of the cycles with them, was that we were great at doing video analysis in there and then on the day, in prep for competition, during competition, and reviewing. But what we didn't really capture was more information that was wrapped around that performance. So we started to work more on the data side, so obviously where they're gaining and losing time is an integral part. So there's a lot of, I guess, time-based data that we would work with, looking at different moves that they would do, the choices they would make, looking at how does that compare to the best in the world, over a period of competitions versus one single competition. They go from different courses. So you're looking at kind of like, I suppose, what we would call in performance analysis profiling the course, to look at what's the makeup of that course, what are the different challenges that are going to come up against, what have we covered within that course. So almost like a curriculum, like, making sure that you've covered all aspects of that course. And then so when the course design is up, which gets done like the day before if you're lucky, they can go back and we can pull out all the different moves they've done and almost make up a virtual run of that course if you're lucky to have all that content. So yeah, very very time-based analysis, and I guess that's expanded as they've learned how to embed performance analysis into their coaching process. And they're continually challenging all the time. They're a great group of coaches to work with, and really open to trying new things, and same with the athletes really, which is great.
Yeah, no, that was interesting what you said about the court. Like, so they wouldn't know the course until just before, pretty much, and then it was kind of adapt to it as soon as you can, almost. So would that change over different days in the competition or heats or whatever, or would it?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not as savvy on the rules as I was back in the day, but it definitely there's like heats course, semi-final and final courses, and then you throw in the weather, so you could have courses that at the moment it's really hot, isn't it? So water levels are dropping if they're coming off natural rivers. If they're the purpose-built courses, like if you look at Lee Valley, what the best in the world course, it's pumped water, but they can choose the level of those pumps, and then then you can have the extreme weathers, again off the natural rivers where there's flooding or it backs up. So and then the wind, throw the wind in there, and the poles are everywhere. So there's lots of different challenges that are thrown, let alone the fact that the course gets designed, and they don't get to practice on that course. So they'll have like demonstration runs from non-competitors. They watch, that's fascinating, the way they would watch them, then work out what their best race plan is, and aim to go and execute that. And then within competition, that's really an integral part of the role of the analyst as well, supporting some of the decision making. So obviously, depending on when our athletes are going off from the start line, we might have our opportunity to analyse some of the boats that are coming off first, and have a look at what moves they choose to do, and feed that back. So a coach might say, look, there's likely to be a move on this part of the course, and the coaches maybe have a conversation around it. They'll say, look, can you monitor that? If something different happens that we haven't seen, can you send it through? So they'll pushing information through to them live, and allowing them to have that conversation back with the athlete then around what moves they need to do.
That's really interesting. There's so much more to it than I would have thought. That's really interesting. So just kind of going on, you mentioned a bit about data, Julia, earlier. So obviously that way the scope of performance analysis, video analysis is kind of adapting, and there's a lot more data being collected, being used, and obviously then that leads to actually the data, more roles within data. And I think, again, that some of these roles, especially within sort of the sports that I'm more familiar with, these are filled with, not necessarily people within a sporting background. They could be just pure data analysts, come from a totally different sector. So I think that can kind of be transferred across different sports. Just looking on the website again, there's a current role open for a data scientist with British Sailing, it says on the website. So how have you kind of seen the growth of the data side of things, and the more, so again, just kind of forgetting video for the moment, just data science and data analytics?
Yeah, so that role is like purely, sort of, I guess, ring fence to really focus on the sports performance data that comes in across a number of different areas of their performance planning. So that person will be almost like I guess a little bit further behind the front line, so that they can make sure that they've got the time, capacity, and capability to focus on that data processing. So the performance data strategy has basically got a kind of world-class program facing element to it. So that person will work closely with that team, certainly around the sports data, strategic data sort of plan, their strategy for what they need to do. So where our performance data leads have gone in and almost unpicked the opportunities with their data processing, whether they're capturing some of their analysis and obviously the visualization, and ideally that person will then be embedded in the sport and will be enabling and empowering other people to develop that. And then centrally we've put together a whole learning and community arm to the strategy to try and accelerate that even further. So people that will be light touch with data still have good foundations and good skills to be comfortable doing the right thing, so that when that data needs to go and join with something else to answer a question, it's in a really good good place for that. So these roles are relatively obviously new for this cycle, and you might have like I say, ideally that role purely focusing on that area, or there may be a blend that they're doing within their other role. So it's just trying to find the right balance based on what the sport can invest in and prioritize.
Yeah, perfect. So again, I do want to talk about kind of the whole Olympic cycle, but obviously as we've just kind of come to the end of a Commonwealth, we might as well touch on that a little bit as well. So just curious to know how involved you were. Maybe you had staff out on the field, like, and what your role was like over the last sort of 2 weeks, kind of when the games were kind of going on.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different to kind of the Olympic side, where I was pretty much seconded to the British Olympic Association to deliver and lead on their analysis provision out in Tokyo, and back in we had a team back in Cardiff. So Commonwealth Games, we had the analysts that needed to be on the ground with their sports, doing what they always do, and some supporting remotely. So we had Jess, who's leading on the boxing side, fully integrated into the day-to-day support that she would do, in any major sort of championship. Then Chris Connolly supporting, and pushing whatever information is needed to prepare for the next bouts. So we predominantly had around 6 or 7 of our analysts spread across. So we did the hockey, 2 analysts out there. What great games they had. Then we had our netball analyst embedded in there as well, and so it was a good mix within the whole Commonwealth Games campaign, really, in Birmingham.
Yeah, no, definitely. So in terms of obviously the Olympics is like the cycle you kind of mentioned a few times. How ingrained is that in what you do? Like, is everything focused towards the Olympics? Like, obviously, so let's say the Olympics just finished and you've got a 4-year period, then what kind of goes on at the early part of that? I mean, maybe the funding's distributed and is the plan already in place for the next cycle, etc. Like, obviously it's a big cycle, and obviously that's what everyone's kind of building towards. I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about that, really.
Yeah. Obviously, this has been the weirdest cycle ever. Back end of Tokyo, and then that extension of a year. So nobody has ever been through anything like that before. So it's totally taken out year one in some respects, or you could say we've just doubled up. So we've been trying to review, prepare for Paris, and go through a lot of change. So typically after a cycle, there could be a bit of change, whether that's personnel, sports structure, funding, all that kind of stuff. And it normally gives us a really good opportunity to review, work with the sports, look back, pick out all the good, the bad, and the ugly, and really look to embed that plan into the next cycle. So like I say, it's put a bit of a spanner in the works, and because we're kind of halfway through the Paris cycle now, with that. So essentially, it doesn't always quite work out of this, but early on the cycle, if you're in early, as in like you're in that role through the whole the cycle, you get an opportunity to obviously embed, understand, working with the coaches, and kind of like when it comes to that pre-Olympic year, you're kind of well-oiled machine, and you know what you're doing, how you're doing it, the kind of coaches that you're working with. But obviously you've got to prepare for things that could change during the cycle, or if there's something that's going to be an obvious, like change that piece of kit for that, and you're going to get a win out of it, you do it. But obviously we're going to be going, some sports already qualifying for Olympics. Next year is going to be, ramped up to another level as well. So a lot of our analysts will be supporting that side of things. And then in that sort of 12-month period outside of the games, then you're really honing in, head down, focused on Olympic and Paralympic delivery.
So then are you, in your role then, are you kind of overseeing the analysts that are on the ground and maybe helping them out where they need it? And would that, you mentioned like the review process, so like let's say, would that be something that you would obviously take seriously in terms of after the games happened, let's look at how we performed, not only just whether we won a medal or not, but the processes that the analysts did, and maybe we can tweak that for the next one, and we can do this a little bit different because it would work more efficiently this way. Would you be involved with the different sports, or would that be left down to the sporting analyst for that, that particular sport, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I suppose what I did after, or it was probably still in the lead up because of the crossover, it was still in the lead up to Tokyo, but it was very much right, what do we need to stop doing, continue doing, or start doing within the area. So it was almost like what I called like a bit of a evolution of performance analysis. And when Chris White was in place, we had a pretty extensive kind of list of all the things that an analyst would do across that whole capture, analysis, and landing the message, kind of the key pillars of PA for us, and it's almost like getting everyone to feed into that and go, right, go through what is it we need to make sure we're moving in the right direction on. So a bit like slightly higher level stuff that could then pull out maybe some themes and opportunities for us to target. And one of them was like our data skills as well, and we launched Code School. If you Google that on our EIS, one of our comms, we did a bit of an article last, I think it was Coding Week or something in September. And we did quite a lot of scoping out, should we, shouldn't we, is this something we need to be going down? And the answer was yes, and we have no regrets, and we've got a fantastic group of analysts through Code School. I think we're on cohort 3 now, and they've been able to speed up processes, develop their workflows, automate. We what's called Project Automate now, so that's a key theme for us. So is there anything that we can make more streamlined and more slick on the front line? We would then work with our practitioners on that, and that's what the technical lead team does. So they will be, closer again than me to the heads of performance support that are leading on their sports support team, and then obviously the analyst that's integrated into that, and we would work with them on what's the priority areas for them, and how does that all link up, and then we can target whether that's looking into some of their protocols or their processes in competition versus upskilling on Python or Power BI or Tableau or whatever it is, on data processing, or their prep, which is an integral part of getting the most out of their data. So or it could be going into that coaching process, skill acquisition type stuff.
There's your dog barking. You did say you might
done well. She's done well, fair play, and there's no one here.
No, so because we spoke about obviously transferring skills from different sports, so that would be, am I right in saying then the analysts of all the, you would meet as a group of analysts, irrespective of one's from boxing, one's from, the different sports, just to kind of share ideas and grow as a whole team? Is that what you would do? Yeah,
so we get together maybe twice a year. We've got a forum coming up in September, and the goal is really about we've obviously quite a lot of newbies start as well. So it's going to be about connecting the people. It's going to be about sharing, stealing off each other, taking things, so very much where are we, check-in, halfway through the cycle kind of thing. Are we on track? Just bring that team together face to face, which obviously has been a challenge over the last couple of years. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be celebrating our 20 years in November as a whole organisation as well, which is always normally a highlight of the year. Yeah. And again, a learning opportunity and just like be inspired, and probably just take a moment to realise how lucky and privileged we are to work in this sort of area. We do a lot of stuff. Obviously, we can do quite a lot online as well. And then, like I said, rather than sometimes getting everyone together, you don't always get the individual impact you need. So between getting together as a whole and tailoring that to more of a wider theme, we would do a lot of smaller group stuff. So you might have some themes that go on within certain sports that they're all trying to tackle, or it could be a one-to-one support. So it varies really. Try and be as flexible as we can to get the best out of it.
Yeah, no, perfect. And just going back to kind of the audience that watch these kind of videos, a lot of them are kind of students, Julia, people that are looking to get into a career and following your kind of footsteps, really. So what would you say in terms of advice for someone that's maybe at university now and they're interested in what you're saying? Maybe they want to go out to, be an analyst in some of the more obscure sports. So what kind of advice would you give to someone looking to kind of forge a career in performance analysis?
Yeah, such a common question to be asked, isn't it? And I'm obviously I flash back to my days, and I don't think a huge amount has changed apart from obviously the technology and in the sense of like networking, like just reach out, connect. You talked about LinkedIn. It's obviously a really good platform now for that. Persist. If this is your passion and your love, go get it. Like no one's gonna open doors for you. You've got to go and knock on them, and then once they're open, get your foot in, and then get your other foot in. So, and sometimes you get some knockbacks. I didn't get my first job with the IS. Took me a couple of attempts, and you just gotta, if it's what you love, just keep driving that. Obviously, wrap around all the development. Try and get into some work experience around that, where that's linked ideally when you're doing your studies, so you link it with your modules and you get the right mentoring and support, and then ideally then being able to pick up some consultancy. You don't have to, I remember this, there wasn't many full-time jobs back in my day, so I didn't have a choice, so I was pretty much 4 jobs wells at the time, and just you try and pick up different experiences along the way. Be really curious. You don't know everything, and you never will. And just try and understand through questioning and with when you get that engagement with coaches or athletes or other support staff, how they've been able to develop within their provision. So. Yeah, I think it's definitely persistence, because there's not a lot of these jobs out there, and even less in our world. Yeah. Networking, connecting, and obviously, technically being great.
Yeah, I mean that goes, like the networking is so underrated. I mean, obviously it goes for any job or anything in life really, but it's so underrated that. See, LinkedIn, I've done videos separate just on LinkedIn, and I think people don't realize how useful and how powerful it can be just to learn from others that are in the jobs that you want to be in, just to kind of connect and ask questions and, like you said, be curious. And I think when people are at university now, every university pretty much that I know will have teams that compete on a Wednesday, but so they can kind of go and they have these, they'll have a university taekwondo team or whatever it is, so they can grab a camera and just trying to do some work and just get used to being involved with the team really, and that can only be a benefit, I would say. But yeah, no, I fully agree with what you said, Julie. I mean, have you, again, kind of following on from that question, I presume, I may be wrong, but have you kind of been involved in hiring analysts then? So would you have interviewed analysts? So, because again, that's something that I get asked a lot in terms of obviously the application process. So how to do a CV, how to do this. But then what are you looking for when you kind of interview an analyst? What kind of things would you say would stand the person in good stead? Obviously, I know it might be that what they've done previously, but maybe other skills as well.
I mean, even before getting that application in, I think obviously doing your homework, reaching out to the employers, or maybe you might know people that have worked in similar sports or scenarios that you can reach out to support you. So yeah, definitely before that. I love it when people get in touch, and probably regret saying that now. No, I do, like, I genuinely do, like, and even if they're not applying for something, I'm happy to have a convo. Sometimes the timing's not quite right, but certainly try and make sure I give time for that. So yeah, reaching out and connecting and having that, the guts to contact them. Again, this is my preference, by the way, so there's no land with other people, but when you get that application in, just check it again and check it again and check it again, and get someone else to proofread it.
Yeah.
Make sure you're applying for the right job and you haven't put the old job that you just applied for, because appreciate that there's either no jobs that come out and they all come rushing out, and then you're having to adapt your letter and your CV to that job that you're going for. There's nothing wrong with that. So I would definitely make sure attention to detail, which is obviously a key component of analysis role anyway. And obviously checking out the process. Every employer has a different process, and it might have changed by when you've applied for a previous job somewhere else. So what system and how you've got to apply? Is it a CV? Is it a letter? Is it both? Is it tasks, so on? So doing your homework really, even before you get that application in, is critical. And then you've got, obviously, you've got to stand out. So if we're saying our analysts are some of the best, landing the message, as Chris White would say, right under the coach and translating information and visualizing that effectively, then let's make sure our CV looks hot, and up to date with isn't written in words like I used to do many years ago, because I had a word processor, I think it's just basics, doing that basics, essentially.
Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% agree, because I was actually going through, because we're in the process of hiring some analysts at the moment, some part-time analysts, and so we've been going through the CVs, and like we were past some, and I mean, some didn't even have the contact number on. So like, even if I like this person, I couldn't even ring this person. So, but again, in terms of the job of an analyst is to present things and be kind of analytical and kind of so if there are mistakes that you haven't checked and it doesn't look very good, I think that does play a part. So yeah, that's definitely important. So yeah, and as well, like you said, in terms of networking, that's an open message for people to reach out to you, Julie, on LinkedIn. I suppose you said you don't mind it, so hopefully not too many people watch this and take it up. But I kind of reached out to you obviously before, and yeah, so it's great to kind of learn from people in different roles and stuff like that. And yeah, there's so much you can gain from just sending a message to someone. Yeah, definitely. So in terms of, again, I mean, I could talk to you for another 2 hours, Julie, to be honest, but I won't want to keep you too long. So in terms of, do you have any recommendations of any useful books, podcasts, or anything? And this doesn't have to be sports analysis. It can just be anything that you kind of think you want to give a shout out to, or anything that you think other people would enjoy.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when I was seeing some of your prep questions, and I don't do a huge amount of reading books, which sounds really, bad. I do like listening to podcasts though, and I do like reading articles, and I tend to be on Twitter, kind of really honing in on stuff I want to follow and mix it up a little bit. And obviously, I guess anything technical, that comes through those sort of streams, I'll hone in on. There has been a few things around leadership as well. So I was definitely into, I guess, understanding yourself and getting the best out of you, and then working with others, because it complements the technical side. So anything that relates to that, there's some really good stuff out there. And although I haven't got a list of them right now, but it changes all the time, probably the stuff I read back in the days does not even exist anymore. But and obviously, what else would it be? Like the podcasts, again, just go and pick a random topic and search through them. And again, I've listened to some crazy stuff around the sort of the data landscape as well, and trying to relate that to our world on the ground. But for me, it's mainly been like leadership, obviously getting into a head of role, how am I going to lead a team of analysts across a diverse, number of different sports, and how am I going to, work well with other heads of and get the best out of that in other discipline areas as well. So yeah, it's been a big focus around that, really.
Yeah, I think you're right though, because some people can be too blinkered and just consume analysis, but being an analyst, there's a lot. You mentioned kind of leadership, obviously communication, psychology. There's a lot of things you can pick up that's going to benefit you as a whole as an analyst. So yeah, and like you said, just kind of search, and there's a load of cool data podcasts out there as well. So I mean, to be honest, Julia, I've gone through everything in terms of my initial question. So is there anything that you want to add, give a shout out to, anything at all before we kind of wrap it up?
Just like I say, I'm more than happy for people to reach out, and if you want to chat performance analysis, that's obviously one of my number one topics in my life. So yeah, please do, and please check out the EIS website as well. We've obviously got a number of careers and jobs that come out on there. We're also going to be launching a performance data website as well that links off ours, that will hopefully help across the whole data life cycle and inspire you to take on different things. And yeah, go and try that one thing that you've always wanted to do. Just go and do it. No one else can do it. You've got to do it yourself.
Perfect. There you go. Thanks, Julia. Thanks very much. Honestly, really appreciate your time. And as Julia said, if anyone's got any questions for either of us, you can obviously leave them in the comment below. And maybe we'll do another one in the future, Julia. But this has been brilliant. So thanks very much for your time.
No worries. Thanks, Chris. Take care.